Good morning, Regen. I hope you're all doing well and are continuing to find these videos useful. It's my turn again to talk to you this week. And I'm hoping to encourage you this week in your time serving and serving Jesus, serving the church at this time. And those who listened to my last talk a couple of weeks ago, I sort of briefly touched on this subject. And I know other people have in some of the other talks that have been happening, particularly Lynn, who spoke briefly on the topic a couple of weeks ago. So I'd encourage you all to look at those talks. If you've missed them, if you missed any of the Regen videos that go out on a Sunday, they're all still available on the Beacon YouTube channel. So I would encourage you to look into those. And hopefully, as some of you with your families have been signing into the Zoom meetings we've been having on a Sunday morning, instead of regular church, we've been meeting at 10:30 in the morning on Zoom. And hopefully you've been signing into them and listening to the teaching as well. If you have, you'll know that the eldership team have thought it right to teach from the book of Daniel at this time. And over the last, I think, 3 weeks we've been in it now, and we've discussed the first couple of chapters of Daniel, looking at Israel's exile into Babylon, and obviously focusing on Daniel and his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Those obviously their Israelite names. As you'll know, the men found themselves in a difficult position. They, along with the rest of Israel, have been taken away from their homeland, and they have been, those four guys, along with some others, have been specifically chosen by the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, for re-education. And that basically meant they were going to be taken away from the Israelites to learn how to be a Babylonian man, how to act, how to teach, how to worship the new Babylon gods. And the idea being that after this time of re-education, they'd be able to filter into Babylonian society and then teach the Israelites as well. When they came out, they'd be able to pass on that education to their fellow Israelites. And hopefully the thinking behind it is you then have an entirely new population who are educated the same as your current population. And if you're familiar with the story, and if you've been, we've touched on it a little bit already, that's not exactly how Daniel and his friends saw it. And I'll unpack that a little bit. But they did go along with some of this plan. They acted as they were expected in many ways. But at the same time, they didn't do anything that contradicted the law of their God. And they didn't do anything that went against God. And that was little things like refusing to worship Babylonian gods, refusing to partake of the meals that the king had provided for them, all because in some way it wasn't the law which the Jews and the Israelites at the time believed, and they lived their life by this law. And if you've been looking, like I say, on the Sunday mornings, you'll understand why the eldership team have decided to teach from this story, and you might get a glimpse of that from what I just said in the outline of the book. It kind of mirrors the situation we find ourselves in. Obviously, we haven't been taken over by a foreign power, forced into exile, and then have to live under new rules and new religions. But in a manner of speaking, we are in a foreign world at the moment. We have new laws, which obviously weren't the case 7 or 8 weeks ago, and we're struggling to find where we fit in this time and trying to continue to serve God as we do it. So you'll notice as we continue to go through the book of Daniel that although Daniel and his friends don't always follow their direct orders, there's never any outright dissent, and they never kick up too much of a fuss. They're very polite in the way they go about things. And I think If you want a bit more detail on those things, I would recommend again on the Beacon YouTube channel to watch Drew's talk from last Sunday, and he unpacks that a bit more. But for now, all I really want to focus on is the fact that Daniel and his friends are in this situation. They are obeying some of the laws of their new world, while at the same time still obeying the laws of their God. And at the same time as those four, I want to look at another man in the Bible, which you may have heard of, and that's the story of Joseph, who in many ways is in a similar situation to Daniel. He eventually finds himself in a new land and finds himself governed by new laws and is under the control of a new master. So as many of you may know, if you know the story well, Joseph was sold into slavery by his jealous brothers, and he found himself in slavery in Egypt. He was a slave of a man called Potiphar, who was actually the captain of the royal guard, the palace guard, sorry. So he was quite a high up man in society, much like Daniel, who is a direct servant of Nebuchadnezzar. They both find themselves in situations where they're serving a powerful man of the country. And we're told that in the story, through the story of Joseph, he, like Daniel, he never kicks up too much of a fuss. You'd expect, if you've been taken by your family and sold into slavery, you'd put up some kind of a fight, especially when you get to your new place. It's something different. You might not expect to have to live like that. But Joseph does what he's told. He gets on with his life, and eventually he earns the respect of Potiphar and the people that he's working with, and Potiphar promotes him up until he looks after Potiphar's entire house. And then, as we know, he falls back down. He ends up in jail, and then he rises steadily up through the ranks again through respectful working for his masters until he is second in command of all of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. But at all times, you'll notice in both the story of Daniel and the story of Joseph, they're always looking to bring glory to God through their work. They're never looking, although they both earn favor with their new masters, Daniel with Nebuchadnezzar and Joseph with eventually the Pharaoh of Egypt, both powerful kings, they never outrightly commit to them. They're always looking to serve God and look how they can serve God. And now, obviously, there's points in the story where they don't do this perfectly. And I mean, you can look through the entire Bible. You're only going to find one person that lives out their calling perfectly. That's obviously Jesus. So that's a little side point, I guess. I don't want you to be disheartened if you're struggling to serve at this time, if you're struggling to find your place and fill in. Everyone struggles, and Joseph and Daniel find themselves struggling at certain points, but they always work towards God. And so that's the sort of challenge I want to bring to you this week. If you look at both Daniel and Joseph, they find themselves in positions that they had not asked to be in. Daniel was probably quite happy in Israel. Joseph was definitely happy at his father's side. And they both end up in a situation they neither asked for or expected to find themselves in. They both happened very quickly. We're not told an exact time frame, I believe, but it's pretty much instant from their life of relative safety and peace suddenly into a world that they don't expect. And like I said, they both find themselves under the command of new masters, people who don't care about the God they've left behind and the laws they've left behind. They're people that just expect their now slaves, essentially, to do as they're told and to live the life of a Babylonian or an Egyptian in Joseph's case. And that's might be the situation you find yourself in now. You're obviously still in your home, but you might be in a new land, so to speak. You'll be working from home, or having school from home. You might see your parents around a bit more because they're on furlough, or they're too working from home. And there's just a new situation you find yourself in. You're not able to go to church anymore. You're having to do church at home. So you're not able to worship and serve in the way that you would normally find yourself. Obviously, we still have the opportunity to do worship and to do church and to serve. Joseph and Daniel they didn't have the luxury of a Zoom meeting or people making videos for them. So that should be a real encouragement to you, that you can still find time in your week to worship. It's still openly allowed. So take the comparison with a pinch of salt, but hopefully you get the idea. So one key comparison is we don't have a new master that we're asked to serve. Things are still the same. We don't have an invading, conquering army that are now forcing new laws on us. But like I said at the beginning, we do have new laws to obey, things that 8 weeks ago we took for granted. We now obviously have to stay 2 meters away from anyone that we don't live with. We're not able to just go around and hang out with our friends at their house, or go to a restaurant to have food with them. And even when, well, obviously it's changed now, but we're only allowed out once a day just to leave the house. Now that's a bit more lenient in terms of going out to exercise, but it's still very different. You can't just pop to the shops whenever you feel like it. You have to plan that in a bit more to your day. And we are called to obey those earthly laws. God has put people in command and in charge of our country, and we are called to obey them. And we're lucky enough that these new laws that have been placed are not in any direct contradiction to the way we should be living as Christians. We are still able to worship. We're still able to serve. So unlike Daniel and Joseph, we don't have to compromise too much of ourselves. But it has changed some things. And many of you might say, well, my serving takes place on a Sunday morning. I'm on a rota. I make the coffee. I sit at the back and help with the AV. Some of you might steward, work in kids' work, all things like that. And that is obviously great serving. And the church definitely needs volunteers like that. But I hope you're not thinking that because church isn't on, you're unable to serve. Serving can mean very different things. It's not just what you're rotated onto on a Sunday morning. And like I said a few weeks ago, you might have heard the phrase that you need to be Jesus in the situation. And I believe I challenged you to be Jesus in your household, and to serve your parents in that, and vice versa, parents to serve their children. And I believe that can go a bit further now that we're allowed out a bit more. You might be taking a bit more exercise, a bit more time, and so will other people, and you'll start to see more people around. And it doesn't hurt just to say hello to people as you're walking past. You don't have to stop to have a conversation, but if you feel called to, that's great. And the same with your neighbours when you see them over the garden fence or in the front garden or wherever, just to have a friendly conversation with them, say hello, check in on them, see how their day's going. And that all counts as serving Jesus. When you're doing it out of a heart of love for that person, then you're serving Jesus and you're advancing his kingdom on earth. It just needs to be as simple as being nice to people, calling friends that you haven't heard from in a while just to make sure they're okay, dropping them a text, a message, however it is that you do that. And that could be the same for a relative that you normally see occasionally, but you haven't been able to, just not letting that connection go, just giving them a call or a text to see how they're doing. And ultimately, you can use this as an opportunity going forward. If you build that serving time into your life now, you'll find that it's very easily it very easily sticks in your schedule when we come out of this time and things slowly get back to normal and you can start to see your friends again. You'll find instinctively you're just checking up on them a bit more. And the same with your neighbors. That relationship that's been built in this time, you'll be able to continue as we move forward. So I hope that's been a bit clear. That's the sort of serving that might be what you're called to at the moment. I just want to just declare a bit of scripture over you, something that I don't think you can see it in the shot, but we have, me and my wife, just have on the wall over there, and I like to meditate on this on most days. And it's in Joshua. It's Joshua chapter 14, verse 15. And it's if it was to be written down, it would have a 14b, just because it's the last little bit. It's just the last few words, and it says, "But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." I just want to encourage you maybe to make that the claim over your house and your life at the moment, that no matter what else is going on around you, your first and most foremost thought is, how will you serve the Lord? And I just want that to be a challenge for you, that the Lord should be the Lord over your life, and you should be looking to serve him as and when you can. So yeah, I hope this has been of some kind of encouragement to you. And yeah, I just pray that you just press into that. See, there might be something extraordinary that God's calling you to do at this time, and to serve someone else. And I pray that that is the case, and we start to see some incredible acts of serving coming out of the church as a whole, not just the youth group. So yeah, have a great week, and hopefully see you all soon.